Hello and welcome to another drawing tutorial. In this month we're going to capture something simple that is going to teach you three very important drawing lessons all in one. How to draw using two different types of edges to your objects, how to give those objects a sense of dimension, and how to create the sense of depth in your drawings. All three of these really come down to learning how to master edges. And to me, one of the very best things that you can draw in order to really focus on just edges is soap bubbles. The farther away an object is, the less contrast it has, the less detail it has, and the more blurred the edges are. As an object comes up closer to our vision, we can see more detail, we're going to see sharper contrasts, and we're going to see more definite edges. And since we're doing a drawing today in black and white, I printed my reference in both color and black and white, and that will allow me to really see the contrasts more easily. As you go around the bubble, there are edges that are lost, and there are edges that are sharp and hard. So, to show you the difference between those, let me get a pencil. I'll use a little template here and just draw a bubble by tracing hard on one side and then lifting up the pencil a lot and then lifting it completely off, light, dark, and around. Now, here you can see hard edges, here you can see lost edges because it's not even drawn at all, and yet the eye is going to fill that in. On the bubble here, we see the lost edges as a line of white. We see hard edges as a line of black or dark gray. When there is a darker color in the background, that's when the light becomes lighter, and that's when we develop it by using our kneaded eraser. So if this had a background to it, for instance right here, I could pull out my highlight line by mashing my kneaded eraser and pulling out a clean highlight edge, like this. So now let's get to the actual bubble drawing. I want 3 bubbles, and I want to have a eye-pleasing arrangement. So not a bubble right in the middle of the page. Try not to lift your pencil. So there's my first bubble outline. Now I'll have one that is behind it. And one more that same size up higher. Now you're also going to notice that there is a definite highlight, if not multiple highlights, on a bubble. So let's go ahead and lighten up the line of this bubble that falls behind the one in front. You're going to see it a little bit less distinctly because it's coming through another object. And let's lighten up some parts of these other bubbles that we drew so that we have a definite highlight edge and dark edge. So now I want to carefully preserve those highlights, and I need to know where they are, so I'm going to draw them lightly. And a lot of the realism when you're drawing bubbles comes through precision. So it is going to be very important to protect those highlight shapes. And let's do one more bubble that's quite a bit smaller and floating away. That one there. So this one is going to have really imprecise highlights, and the edges are going to be more fuzzy. But now let's get out our trusty Frisket film and a sharp pair of scissors and protect all of those little highlights. So remember, this is all about precision. You need to trace each and every one of those highlights, and then I'm going to use straight edges to clean them up even more. So I get the basic shape down, but then I'm using a straight edge to make them really precise. So I'm going to trace all of these on the Frisket film, then I'm going to carefully cut them out with some nice sharp scissors, peel off the back, and stick them on. When you have protected your highlights, then you can start to add tone to the bubble. So If you look, you can see that this is the bubble closest because it has the highest contrast. Really, really dark blacks right in the middle here. As the bubbles are farther away, those blacks turn to lighter and lighter gray. And so since this is my largest bubble, I'm going to start by outlining really vaguely the shape of that dark, and there's a smaller highlight right in the middle of it. So I'm going to work around that highlight, go all the way up to the frisket film, and then here I see another shape. I'll do similar work, and where the bubbles overlap, there's just going to be a really fine highlight line so that you can see the edge of each bubble, but you can still see right through them. I'm going to add similar shapes to the bubble that's closer in front, and I'm going to keep the darks a little bit lighter. And I'll do the same sort of thing in the bubble that's up top. The shapes of the dark shadows don't have to be exactly the same on every bubble, but do make the contrasts or the values consistent. These are the same size and they're about the same distance from the viewer, so I want those shadows to be about the same contrast. And then here in the background, very light. I'm going to add a little bit of tone, but this is by far the lightest bubble with the lightest contrasts. Then pick up your stomp, use the largest one you can for the area, and just blend those tones smooth. Before you go very far, make sure that you clean up your highlight shapes. When you're blending the bubbles that are larger, they have that frisket film, so you can blend all the way up to the frisket film. And then try to use a circular stroke so that your blending passes look realistic and follow the curve of the bubble. For the larger bubbles too, you can get a smoother tone by using a chamois cloth wrapped around your finger, and then just press down hard and blend. But it is going to smear quite a bit more than your Stomp and Tortillon will, so you can only use it in the beginning passes before you have those shapes really definite with clean lines. Because after you use a chamois cloth, you have to immediately go back and clean up any lines that got out of boundaries, and then pluck out your highlights again, because you're surely going to go right over the top of everything. So here, for instance, I have to clean up the outside edge of this bubble, and I have to go back into the bubble and pull out some clean highlights. So this is what we were talking about when we examined the bubble to begin with. Remember that you saw highlight edges and dark drawn edges. After you put down that first smooth pass of tone, you pull out those sharp highlights and the highlight edges with your kneaded eraser. And when you want to make a nice clean line with your eraser, be bold, use enough pressure, and just try to do it in one short pass so that it stays as clean as you can possibly make it. After blending that first pass, you might need to go in again and darken up some of those smaller shapes. Especially here in the largest bubble, I might need to go over my highlights and bring them out a little bit more cleanly. And try to keep the highlight rim around the bubble nice and even. And then I want to make these darks very smooth and solid, so I'm going to press down hard. So see how I can just go from bubble to bubble and add a little bit more detail. And here in the overlap, I'm going to lighten the tone, because when two bubbles overlap, oftentimes the tone between looks whiter. Then, after the tones are in place, I'm going to take some time with my details. The designs and patterns on a soap bubble can be really intricate and interesting. Like we saw in the reference material, sometimes they can reflect an entire scene within the bubble itself. And so in this stage you can add as much detail as you wish, Just use a nice sharp pencil and make sure that you're keeping your lines precise and dark enough, and then take your time and add what you will. Since the bubble is made of soap, it will often have a kind of swirl of dark and light on the surface. So I might go back now and add some of those swirling darks. Just remember that after you put down a passive tone, you need to blend it with your stomp or tortillon so that your tones stay consistently smooth and give the bubble that glassy surface look. Let me take a few minutes off camera here and just do those final details. Then we'll come back and I'll show you how to remove the frisket. Now I'm more satisfied with the contrasts of my bubbles. You can see that this one is lighter in contrast, and then there's more going on in the design in this forefront one. So I'm going to remove that frisket film now. And to do that, I'm going to very carefully slide something very fine under the edge. You have to work carefully so that you don't damage your paper at all. But then you can peel up and get that nice clean highlight. Now these are standing out pretty starkly, and so I'll have to do a little bit of refinement to blend them into the rest of the picture. So I'm not actually going to add any tone to blend those in. What I'm going to do is just take this side that should be a little less contrasty and blot out that end with my kneaded eraser. So obviously I'm not blotting out the highlight, I'm just diminishing the contrast by blotting out the tone that's next to the highlight. You can do this by just gently rubbing on one side. So this now is my final bubble drawing. So you can see that there's a clear distinction in the contrasts from the closer bubbles to the ones that are the very farthest away. And that's what I want you to focus on when you're trying this exercise in your studio. So drawing bubbles is a great way to work on not only precise lines, but learning how to delineate between hard edges and highlight edges, as well as giving you a great way to focus on developing depth in your drawings. So this is definitely one to try at home, and that concludes this month's drawing tutorial. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you've learned some things that you can take away with you to your own studios.